Okay, this is take 3, because now Audacity has decided it was going to erase everything I spent the last hour and a half recording. So welcome to the Commander's Forge. My name is Andy Bentley, and I'm currently ready to throw this computer out the damn window. Now, the Commander's Forge is an area for me to talk about Magic, Commander, and anything else while I try and not feel this way. That said, again, for the third time, I'm going to run through the top cards that I'm interested in from Modern Horizons 3. Okay? Okay. At number 10, I have the Eldrazi Titans, because they're the Eldrazi Titans. I'm not going into it again. I think Ulamog is the most problematic of the three. I think Kozilek's the most tame. There you go. At 9, we have the Ocelot Pride. It's a cat. It's a 1-mana 1/1 with lifelink and first strike. And it doubles tokens if you have the Ascendancy. Speaks for itself. Next up, we have the Harbinger of the Seas. It is the blue version of Magus of the Moon. Need I say more? My Merfolk deck shall love it. It'll be great. Next up, we have Kozilek's Command. It's a colorless command. It does 4 things that you can do 2 of. It's really good. There you go. At number 6, I have the Flare of Duplication, but this is honestly any of the flares. They're all pretty good. And I'm not going to go into it again, because, again, this is the 3rd time I'm recording this. At 5, we have Necrodominance. Yeah, that's it. That's the tweet. Send it. It's a good card. And it's going to be everywhere. Next up, we have the Echoes of Eternity. Zuladak Rejoice. It's going to make you even more disgusting than you were. Alright, for my top 3, I am going to go a little slower. First up, at number 3, we have Eldamari Corvecto. 1 green for a 3/3 elf warrior. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may cast creature spells from the top of your library. You can pay a green and tap it, and tap 2 untapped creatures you control. Reveal a creature card from your hand or the top card of your library. If you reveal the creature card this way, put it onto the battlefield. Activate only during your turn. Alright, so most people are going to look at this and go, oh, elf. I did not. I looked at this and I went, oh, Goreclaw. Big, beefy green creatures that I would love to get out for free with my dorky little utility creatures. And again, that's kind of it. It's a fun card. That said, I could also see it in either its own deck as the commander, or in the 99 of basically any creature-based deck with green in it. So, yeah. On to my number dose spot. We're looking at Imskir Iron Eater. 6 black-red for a 5/5 demon. It has affinity for artifacts. When Imskir Iron Eater enters the battlefield, you draw X cards, you lose X life, where X is half the number of artifacts you control, rounded down. You can pay 3 and a red to sacrifice an artifact. Imskir deals damage equal to the sacrificed creature's mana value to any target. So the greatest comparison we can make here is to Bosch Iron Golem. And if you have a Bosch deck, it will not take much to convert it into an Imskir. That or the mono red Duretti. Just anything that wants to, recycle artifacts that you have a commander for, he can probably be a good commander for that deck, even if you just add black. Adding black gives you more recursion. Ta-da! We solved it. It's great. Moving on to my number one spot is the Necrobloom. 1 green, black, white for a 2/7 plant. It has landfall. Whenever a land enters a battlefield under your control, create a 0/1 green plant creature token. If you control 7 or more lands with different names, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token instead. Land cards in your graveyard have dredge too. So, I have been trying to find a lands deck that doesn't just devolve into taking extra turns, like hard control. And this one encourages you to go wide instead of doing that stuff. So I really like it. But also, are you familiar with a card called Field of the Dead? Because this just has the text of Field of the Dead on it. And if you throw, say, I don't know, a Field of the Dead into that deck, you can start making double the tokens. And this is not constricted to your own turn. If you have something that lets you play lands on your opponent's turn, then voila, you can play lands on your opponent's turn and grow your board. The way to do this is with like burgeoning and bounce lands. So burgeoning is an enchantment that for a single green, whenever an opponent plays a land, you can put a land into play. And then if you do that with a bounce land and another bounce land, right, you can play the bounce land on your turn, bouncing the bounce land that was already in play to your hand. When your opponent plays land, you can play that bounce land and bounce the other bounce land to your hand. And then as long as each of your opponent, plays a land, you can just cycle it, and if you have the requisite amount of lands, you can come out with, 3 additional zombies when you untap. Or if you also have Field of the Dead, 6. So, yeah. If you can't tell by the sound of my voice, I am very tired of talking about this. First it was microphone issues, then it was Audacity just being Audacity. And now I'm here again. I'm going to take a quick break, go get something to drink, and when I come back, I'm going to talk about this deck again. So I'll see you in a minute. Okay, we are back. Now, today I'm going to talk about Theoden, King of Rohan. It's a deck that I built initially and then took apart and then rebuilt and then took apart. And I don't know, I kept trying to find the right balance. And I'm hoping I have it now. But let's go through some of the things I have included. Now, it is, for the most part, a low to the ground, beat 'em up Boros deck with a lot of humans. So, Theoden, King of Rohan is 1 red-white for a 2/3 human noble. Whenever Theoden or another human enters the battlefield under your control, target creature gains double strike until end of turn. Starting off on the cheap side, we have Champion of the Parish, single white mana for a 1/1 human soldier. Whenever another human enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Champion of the Parish. Next up, we have Thalia's Lieutenant, 1 and a white for a 1/1 human soldier. Whenever Thalia's Lieutenant enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on each other human you control. Whenever another human enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Thalia's Lieutenant. Into more utility creatures, we're looking at things like Frontier Warmonger, 3 and a red for a 4/4 human warrior that says whenever one or more creatures attack one of your opponents or a planeswalker they control, those creatures gain menace till end of turn. Next up in that same vein of thought, utility, we have Direfleet Daredevil. 1 and a red for a 2/1 human pirate with first strike. When the Daredevil enters the battlefield, exile target instant or sorcery card from an opponent's graveyard. You may cast it this turn. You may spend mana as though it were mana of any type to cast that spell. If that spell would be put into a graveyard this turn, exile it instead. This card has gotten better and better for me over the months. Even just being something cheap like, hey, I'm going to play this, I'm going to get your swords, and then use that to exile your commander. The craziest thing I've done with it is I got a Rite of Replication out of Akoma's graveyard, and then used that to make 5 copies of Koma, because they had already made a non-legendary token copy of Koma. That game got real screwy real fast. But continuing on, next up we have Coppercoat Vanguard, 1 and a white, 2/2 human soldier. Each other human you control gets +1/+0, and ward 1. Now we're going to get into more of the meat of the creatures. One of the things we want to do consistently is get creatures into play. One of the best ways to do that in this deck is with Riders of Rohan. 3 red-white for a 4/4 human knight. When Riders of Rohan enters the battlefield, create 2/2 red human knight creature tokens with trample and haste. But more importantly, it has dash for 4, a red and a white, so that means you can play it, it gains haste, and then you return it at the beginning of the end step. So the nice thing with this and Theoden is when you play this as a dash, it enters, it can give itself double strike. Same with the other 2. And so for 6 mana, you're all of a sudden able to throw around like 14 damage. It's a lot. Next up, we have Éomer of the Rittermark. 4 and a red for a 5/4 human knight with haste. Whenever Éomer of the Rittermark attacks, if you control a creature with the greatest power among creatures you control on the battlefield, create a 1/1 human soldier creature token. Now, we do have other ways of growing the creatures that we'll talk about after the creatures, but one of the ways I found that I really enjoy doing it is with Adriana, Captain of the Guard. 3 red-white for a 4/4 human knight with melee, and other creatures you control have melee. Now, melee is, whenever this creature attacks, it gets +1/+1 till end of turn for each opponent you attack this combat. So if you have Adriana and Éomer out and you attack all 3 of your opponents, all of a sudden, Éomer has 8 toughness, or 8 power. It just works together well. Moving on, we have Baragond of the Guard, 3 and a white for a 3/3 human soldier. Whenever Baragond or another human enters the battlefield under your control, creatures you control get +1/+1 and vigilance till end of turn. So this is just very utility to help you attack better. Good times. Next up, we have Éomer, King of Rohan. 3 red-white for a 2/2 human noble. He has double strike. When he enters the battlefield, you put he enters with a +1/+1 counter for each other human you control. And then when he enters the battlefield, target player becomes the monarch, and Éomer deals damage equal to its power to any target. So, hopefully you get this down when there's already a few tokens out, maybe your commander out, and you just become the monarch, dome something for, 6, and then, go to town. Next up, we have Erkenbrand, Lord of Westfold. 3 and red for a 3/3 human soldier. Whenever Erkenbrand, Lord of Westfold, or another human enters the battlefield under your control, creatures you control get +1/+0 till end of turn. Again, helping pump the creatures to go harder. And the last 2 we'll run out with are Éowyn and another Éomer. So, Éowyn, Fearless Knight, is 2 red-white for a 3/4 human knight with Haste. Whenever she enters the battlefield, exile target creature an opponent controls with greater power. Legendary creatures you control gain protection from each of that creature's colors until end of turn. So, yeah, there is a good amount of legendary creatures in this deck. And that also plays to the next card, which is Eomer, Marshal of Rohan. 2 red for a 4/4 human knight with Haste. Whenever one or more other attacking legendary creatures you control die, untap all creatures you control after this phase. There's an additional combat phase. This ability triggers only once per turn. So, this isn't built around his ability, but it can just end a game out of nowhere if you get that second attack phase. You know what I mean? And we're going to round this out with some utility spells. First up in this category, we have the Horn of Gondor. It is a 3-mana legendary artifact. Enters the battlefield, you make a 1/1 human soldier creature token. You can pay 3 and tap it to create X 1/1 human soldier creature tokens, where X is the number of humans you control. So it is an army in a can. Moving on, we have Flowering of the White Tree, 2 white mana, legendary enchantment. Legendary creatures you control get +2/+1, ward 1. Non-legendary creatures get +1/+1. So again, leaning into the fact that we do have a lot of legendary creatures in the deck. Next up, we have another card from this set that honestly has performed very well for me. Rising of the Day, 2 in red for an enchantment. Creatures you control have haste. That text right there, that's just fervor. But legendary creatures you control get +1/+0. So, yeah. Now, a thing that does not go well with having a lot of legendary creatures, but the fact that you can double your board with it, I still included it. And that is Legion Loyalty. 6 white for an enchantment. Creatures you control have Myriad. Myriad is, you attack one opponent, you make a copy token for each other opponent. So, yeah. Again, not great with legendary creatures, but all those tokens we're making, the non-legendary creatures we have, it's just extra damage. Not to mention, whenever you make those copies, they're all already attacking. They see each other coming in, so they just all have double strike. It's insane. It gets nutty. Speaking of nutty, Cathar's Crusade, 3 white for an enchantment. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So again, you pair this with Legion Loyalty. Those things now come in, they get double strike from Theoden, and for however many creatures you make, they enter with that many counters on them, because they all see each other. Shared Animosity, 2 in red for an enchantment. Whenever a creature you control attacks, it gets +1/+0 till end of turn for each other creature, attacking creature that shares a creature type with it. So, doesn't trigger off things that come in tapped and attacking, but it will hit the things that are already attacking. So, good times. Alright, and then we get into, the anthem of it all. Starting with Door of Destinies. 4 mana artifact. As Door of Destinies enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Whenever you cast a spell of the chosen type, put a charge counter on Door of Destinies. Creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1 for each charge counter on Door of Destinies. Paladin class starts as a single white mana, and spells your opponent's cast during your turn cost 1 more to cast. Level 2 is going to cost you an additional 2 and a white. For creatures you control, get +1/+1. And then level 3 will cost you 4 and a white from there. Whenever you attack until end of turn, target attacking creature gets +1/+1 for each other attacking creature and gains double strike. So, yeah. The fourth ability, the last ability there, the level 3, is a good workaround for if Theoden gets to the point where we can't cast him. It's just another way to give something double strike. Next up, we have Nahiri's Resolve, 3 red-white for an enchantment. Creatures you control get +1/+0 and have Haste. At the beginning of your end step, exile any number of non-token artifacts and or creatures you control. Return them to the battlefield under their owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. Again, that's good with like Cathar's Crusade to reset counters on things. It's good with things that come in and make tokens. And again, +1/+0 and haste is nothing to sneeze at. Next up we have the Icon of Ancestry, 3-mana artifact. When enters, choose a creature type. Creatures of the chosen type get +1/+1, and you can pay 3, tap, and look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card of the chosen type from among them, put it into your hand, and put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Radiant Destiny is 3 and a white for an enchantment with Ascend. As Radiant Destiny enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Creatures of the chosen type get +1/+1. As long as you have the city's blessing, they also have vigilance. Rally the Ranks is 1 and a white for an enchantment. As Rally the Ranks enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type. Creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1. And finally, the last of our Anthem/utility cards. In the Trenches, 1 white for an enchantment. Creatures you control get +1/+1. And you can pay 5 and a white to exile target non-land permanent you don't control until In the Trenches leaves the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcery and only once. So, yeah. That there is Theoden in a nutshell. Now, I did kind of rush through it this time because, again, this is the 3rd time I'm recording this, and I'm tired. So, with that, I think I'm going to say adieu, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening. All of my links can be found in my link tree in the description below. I would like to thank Ian Foss and Cody Mulpey of the band The Crypt for allowing me to use music for my opening and ending, along with Nate and Erica Jacobs for making my original logo. And I would also like to thank Christina McNichol for creating my new logo. And I'll see you next time.